You should read old books more than you read new books. Now, why would I make this argument? Well, I've been reading books for, my whole life, I suppose, or most of my life, I suppose. But in the last 20 years, I've really attempted to read books that would enrich my soul, open my eyes to wisdom, and to understand life, the world, the universe better. And in my studies, I've just noticed over and over that the older books, rather than the newer books, are often much more illuminating, helpful, clarifying. And I wonder if that this isn't always an obvious truth. And part of the reason why I think that this is true, even if it's inobvious, is that if you have a book that has stood the test of time, there's probably a good reason for it. In this video, I want to share 3 reasons why you should read old books over new books, so that you might have maybe a broader appreciation of your ability and have the confidence to read older books. And I'm not saying you should never read a new book, by the way. I'm saying that you should prefer the older over the newer for the reasons I'm about to share. So the first reason to read old books is they've generally stood the test of time. If a book is 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,500 years old, and it is still being read with profit, there's probably a reason why. Either it was key to a particular cultural moment, it has perennial wisdom that gives insight into life that needs to be refreshed every single generation. Someone always turns 20, so they often all need to read the same book. Or there is some perspective or idea or depth to a work that is greater than that you'd find anywhere else. It's a work of genius. I think when it comes to political theology, for example, you might think of Augustine's The City of God. When it comes to law codes, you might think of Justinian's law codes, or his, the codes he was able to edit and put together. When you think of philosophy, you might think of Plato or Aristotle. When you think about later philosophy, you might think of Plotinus and others. You think of history, you might think of some of the historians. You might think of Homer and his the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those books have particular value because they're not just books and stories that are irrelevant. The Odyssey, for example, is a book that in many ways is about the hospitality and how we are judged by how we treat others, the foreigner especially. Now, life is short. You might live for 80 years and so on. And you could pursue wealth and accumulation and status and promotions. You can work 60 or 70 hours a week to get these things, and then you'll be at the end of your life, and you'll die. You are born from the dust, and to dust you shall return. And at the end of your life, it's unclear that you will be most satisfied if you have accumulated wealth, status, or prestige. Many people that work in a company for 40 years and gain advancement will leave and be forgotten about almost immediately. And so it makes you ask the question, what's the point of living life? And it strikes me that all of us want to live a fulfilling, happy, joyous, satisfying, meaningful life. And you're not going to find how to do that in the modern day technical manuals or in our technological society, whose goal is to find efficient market connections, more efficient and workmanlike productivity, and so on. You're going to find this in the great works of the soul, the great works that consider what it means to live the happy or the good life. And that was one of the precise aims of ancient philosophy. You can think of Pierre Hadot's philosophy as a way of life. It's Hadot. Pierre may not be his first name. I might have just remembered that. Hadot, H-A-D-O-T. Philosophy as a way of life. And philosophy was essentially how to live your life. Great books give you that insight. A second reason to read old books is they're often much easier to understand than newer ones, especially when it comes to nonfiction. Nonfiction as a genre is often full of footnotes and throat clearing and academic minutia and having to explain all this context and caveat and clarify for every group and subgroup out there what you mean and what you don't mean. You don't want to exclude anyone. But many of the great books have, the reason why they're great is because of the directness of communication, the clarity of thought, and their ability to say things just as they mean. And there is where much of the insight comes from, the certain directness and confidence that comes from these works that provide a sort of depth of reflection, not just from the individual's life, but from standing on the shoulders of those who have come before to elucidate something that is deeper and more important than we might otherwise discover. So you can read a book in theology like Athanasius is on the Incarnation, or you can read a work on philosophy like Plato's Phaedo, and in both cases you'll be able to read them and understand them. Plato in particular uses dialogue to communicate. He was a playwright, and his dialogues are actually quite easy to follow. I would say the depth of his philosophy might take a lifetime, but the actual just dialogue and what's going on, you'll read it, you'll understand it, you'll have questions to work out. That's sort of the point of philosophy, however. The third reason to read old books is that it corrects our blind spots. It opens up our eyes to things that we wouldn't otherwise see. If you read everything in the present, you'll have all the present stereotypes and blinders and assumptions. If you read things from the past or even in different geographies from you, you'll often have different insights on the same truth or in the same reality, things that will open up your eyes to what is and what is not, what is best and what is less than best. I think, for example, of Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy. He was a man who was sentenced to death and is finding consolation in philosophy. And one thing he mentions in his fourth book of The Consolation is one, that evil men don't exist and that evil men are powerless. And what he means by that is that evil, by definition, pursues evil. And what evil is the lack of goodness. It is not achieving what is good. And it's sort of a null category. There's nothing there. It's sort of empty. And so as you pursue that, you become less of yourself. You become nothing in that pursuit. And actually it makes you powerless. Everybody wants what's good. Everybody wants what will make them happy. But what is happiness is good. What is good is what you want to pursue. It's what's good for you and good for all. And so evil people, by definition, pursue evil, and they gain evil, and that is a punishment in and of itself, to be surrounded by and to experience the evil that you're pursuing through the corruption of your desires. And at the end of the day, you have then Boethius saying, although evil men are falsely accusing me and putting me to death, this is not good. At the end of the day, they're powerless to overcome their passions, their desires, their pursuit of evil. They can't actually get what they truly want, which is goodness, happiness, satisfaction, because the evil that they pursue is never ultimately satisfying. It never ultimately is full, substantial good. And they are powerless then, in fact, to achieve that good. They're impotent. Well, the one who maybe lacks the status and the temporary or physical power in the moment, in fact, does have the power, because they can overcome evil with good and pursue the good and be satisfied, because satisfaction is found not in the things that are changeable and lost, but on the things that are unchangeable and deeply true, namely the most deep truths about reality. If you want to know what those are, you got to read these ancient books. In any case, that's just 3 reasons why, and there's many more I could add, that I think that you should consider reading old books. I've mentioned a number of them in this video for you to Google and find. If you enjoyed this, watch the video above my shoulder and like and subscribe.